My guardians invited me to a fancy family dinner, but told me to sit at the kids' table while my married cousins sat with the adults. I quietly got up and left. Hours later, they were desperately calling me. I, 29M, never thought a family dinner would be the moment I finally stood up for myself. But sometimes life forces your hand in ways you never expect. My parents died when I was 12, and my aunt and uncle took me in. They weren't bad people, but they never let me forget I was the charity case. For 17 years, I lived in their shadow, always grateful, always accommodating, always the outsider looking in at their perfect family. Last month, they invited me to what they called a special family celebration at the Riverside Country Club. My uncle had just made partner at his law firm, and they wanted to celebrate with extended family. I should have known something was off when my aunt specifically mentioned it was a formal affair and that I should dress appropriately. I spent 2 weeks' salary on a decent suit. I wanted to look like I belonged for once. The country club was everything I expected: crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the kind of quiet wealth that whispers instead of shouts. My aunt greeted me at the entrance with her practice smile, the one she used when neighbors were watching. She told me how handsome I looked and guided me toward the dining area. That's when I saw the setup. There were 2 distinct seating arrangements. The main table sat in the center of the room, elegantly set for 12 adults. My uncle was there with his business partners, my aunt with her sister and brother-in-law, and my married cousins, Jake and his wife, Sarah, and her husband. They were all laughing, wine glasses already filled, deep in conversation about vacation homes and stock portfolios. Then there was the smaller table pushed against the wall near the kitchen doors. 3 place settings. A folding table with a plastic tablecloth. My aunt gestured toward it cheerfully, explaining that I'd be sitting with my teenage cousins, Emma and Tyler. She said it would be more fun for me there, that the adult table would be boring with all their business talk. Emma was 16. Tyler was 14. I stood there for a moment, processing what was happening. Around me, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware. My cousins at the main table hadn't even acknowledged my arrival. They were too busy discussing their recent promotion and new house purchase. My aunt was still talking, something about how the kids' table always had more fun anyway, when I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly, it was clarity. For the first time in 17 years, I saw the situation for exactly what it was. I told my aunt I needed to use the restroom. Instead, I walked straight to the coat check, retrieved my jacket, and left through the front entrance. The valet asked if I needed my car, but I told him I'd walk. The evening air was crisp, and I needed the clarity that came with movement. My phone started buzzing 20 minutes later. I was 3 blocks away when my aunt's first call came through. I let it go to voicemail. Then my uncle called. Then Jake. Then Sarah. By the time I reached my apartment, I had 14 missed calls and twice as many text messages. The voicemail started apologetic and quickly turned frantic. My aunt's first message was casual, asking where I'd gone and if I was feeling all right. By her third call, she was demanding I return immediately because I was embarrassing the family. My uncle's messages were more direct. He reminded me of everything they'd done for me and how ungrateful I was being. But it was Jake's final voicemail that revealed the truth. He was whispering, clearly away from the main group, and he sounded panicked. He told me that my uncle's business partners had been asking questions about the family dynamic. Apparently, one of them had noticed the seating arrangement and made comments about how odd it was to separate family members like that. My sudden departure had only made things worse. The next morning brought a new wave of contact attempts. My aunt showed up at my apartment at 7 a.m., still in yesterday's dress, makeup smeared. She looked like she hadn't slept. She stood in my doorway explaining that the evening had been ruined, that my uncle's business partners had left early, and that there might be consequences for his new partnership. She wanted to know what I wanted from them. That question hung in the air between us. What did I want? For 17 years, I'd wanted to belong. I'd wanted to be treated like family instead of a grateful dependent. I'd wanted my achievements celebrated and my presence valued. But standing there, looking at my aunt's desperate face, I realized I didn't want any of that from them anymore. I told her I didn't want anything. I explained that I was done pretending we were a happy family when clearly we weren't. I said I appreciated what they'd done for me as a child, but I was an adult now and could take care of myself. She tried to argue, bringing up holidays and family traditions, but I cut her off. I reminded her that at every family gathering, I was either helping in the kitchen watching the younger kids, or sitting separately from the real adults. I pointed out that my college graduation had been treated like a minor inconvenience, while Jake's wedding had been a year-long celebration. The calls continued for days. My uncle tried the guilt approach, reminding me that family sticks together through everything. Sarah attempted the emotional manipulation, crying about how much they all loved me and how I was breaking everyone's hearts. Even my teenage cousins reached out, confused about why everyone was so upset. But it was my aunt's final attempt that almost broke my resolve. She came to my office during lunch, dressed professionally and carrying a folder. She sat across from my desk and laid out what she called a family plan. They wanted to make things right. They'd include me more in family decisions. They'd make sure I sat with the adults at future gatherings. They'd even help me with a down payment on a house if I wanted. All I had to do was come to Sunday dinner and pretend the country club incident never happened. I looked at the folder, filled with printouts of houses in my price range and a handwritten note about family unity. For a moment, I almost said yes. The promise of belonging, of finally being accepted, was tempting. But then I remembered how I'd felt walking away from that restaurant. The lightness, the freedom, the dignity. I told my aunt that her offer proved exactly why I'd left in the first place. She was treating my basic human dignity like a negotiation point. The fact that she thought she could buy my compliance with promises of future respect showed that she still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She left my office in tears, but I felt nothing but relief. Update 1. 3 weeks have passed since the country club incident, and the aftermath has been more revealing than I expected. My uncle's business partnership did suffer consequences, though not in the way my family initially feared. One of his potential partners, a man named Mr. Chun, reached out to me directly. He'd gotten my contact information from my uncle's assistant and wanted to understand what had happened that evening. I met him for coffee, unsure of his intentions. He explained that he'd been watching the family dynamics throughout the dinner and had been disturbed by what he witnessed. As someone who'd also been raised by relatives after losing his parents young, he recognized the subtle signs of exclusion and conditional acceptance. Mr. Chin told me that my uncle's firm was being considered for a major contract with his company, but that he personally couldn't work with someone who treated family members as second-class citizens. He said it reflected poorly on my uncle's character and judgment. I didn't ask him to reconsider, and I didn't defend my uncle. I simply thanked him for his honesty and left it at that. 2 days later, my uncle called me screaming. The contract had fallen through, and he was convinced I'd sabotaged him. He accused me of being vindictive and ungrateful, of destroying the family out of spite. I listened to his entire rant without interrupting, then calmly told him that his actions had consequences, and those consequences weren't my responsibility. Meanwhile, my aunt had been reaching out to mutual friends and extended family members, trying to control the narrative. She was telling people I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I was going through a difficult phase and needed space. She painted herself as the concerned guardian, worried about my mental health and stability. But her plan backfired when my cousin Emma, the 16-year-old who'd been assigned to the kids' table with me, started asking questions. Emma called me directly, wanting to know why everyone was acting so strange. She said the family dinner had been awkward after I left, and that she'd felt uncomfortable being used as justification for my seating arrangement. Emma was smart enough to see through the adults' explanations. She asked me point-blank if I'd been treated unfairly, and I told her the truth. I explained that I'd been placed at the kids' table not because it would be more fun, but because I wasn't considered a real adult family member despite being 29 years old. She was quiet for a long moment, then told me something that broke my heart. She said she'd always noticed how differently I was treated, but had assumed it was normal because I wasn't their real son. She apologized for not speaking up and said she was embarrassed to have been part of excluding me. That conversation with Emma changed everything. She started declining invitations to family gatherings, telling her parents she didn't want to participate in events where people were treated unfairly. Tyler, her younger brother, followed her lead. My aunt was furious. She called me hysterical, accusing me of turning her children against her. She said I was destroying the family unity she'd worked so hard to maintain. I reminded her that there had never been real unity, just the appearance of it, maintained through my silence and compliance. Update 2. The ripple effects continued to spread in ways I never anticipated. My cousin Sarah, who'd initially tried the emotional manipulation approach, surprised me by showing up at my apartment last weekend. She looked exhausted and asked if we could talk honestly, without the family politics. She told me she'd been thinking about the country club dinner and had started remembering other incidents over the years. She recalled my high school graduation, where I'd sat alone in the back while the family filled the front rows for Jake's ceremony the year before. She remembered Christmas mornings where I'd helped serve breakfast while everyone else opened presents, then received my gifts separately, almost as an afterthought. Sarah admitted that she'd always known something was wrong, but had convinced herself it wasn't her place to interfere. She said watching me walk away from that dinner had forced her to confront her own complicity in the family's treatment of me. She apologized, not just for the recent events, but for years of passive participation in my exclusion. She said she wanted to have a real relationship with me, separate from the family drama, if I was willing. I appreciated her honesty, but I told her I needed time to process everything. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, doesn't rebuild overnight. The most unexpected development came from my uncle's law firm. Apparently, word of the failed partnership had spread, and other potential clients had started asking questions about my uncle's character. The legal community is smaller than people think, and reputation matters enormously. My uncle's senior partners called him in for a meeting about his personal conduct affecting business relationships. He was forced to take a temporary leave of absence while they reviewed his position at the firm. When I heard about this through Sarah, I felt a complex mix of emotions. I hadn't set out to destroy my uncle's career, but I also couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. Actions have consequences, and he was finally experiencing some. My aunt made one final attempt at reconciliation, this time bringing my grandmother, her mother, as backup. My grandmother was 92 and had always been kind to me, though she'd never intervened in family dynamics. They sat in my living room, my grandmother holding my hands while my aunt explained how much the family needed me, how lost they all were without me, how sorry everyone was for any misunderstandings. But it was my grandmother who cut through the manipulation. She looked at my aunt and said, in her quiet but firm voice, that there had been no misunderstanding. She said she'd watched for years as they treated me like a grateful servant rather than a beloved family member, and she was ashamed of what her daughter had become. My aunt broke down completely then, sobbing about how hard it had been to raise someone else's child, how she'd done her best, how she'd never meant to make me feel unwanted. My grandmother squeezed my hands and told me I had every right to choose my own family now. She said blood doesn't automatically create love or respect. Those things have to be earned and maintained. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized something profound. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free. Free from the obligation to be grateful for scraps of affection. Free from the need to prove my worth to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth their full acceptance. Update 3. 6 months have passed since that dinner, and my life has transformed in ways I never expected. The most significant change has been my relationship with Emma and Tyler. Without the family pressure and manipulation, we've developed a genuine connection. Emma is applying to colleges now, and she asks for my advice because she trusts my perspective. Tyler has started calling me just to talk about school and his interests. They visit my apartment regularly, and we've created our own small family unit separate from the larger dysfunction. My aunt and uncle have largely stopped trying to contact me directly, though I hear updates through Sarah, who has kept her word about building an independent relationship with me. She and her husband have included me in their social circle, introducing me as their cousin without any of the complicated backstory. The most surprising development has been professional. Mr. Chun, the business partner who'd witnessed the country club incident, offered me a position at his company. He said he'd been impressed by my dignity under pressure and wanted someone with strong character on his team. The job came with a significant salary increase and, more importantly, a work environment where I'm valued and respected. My uncle's career never fully recovered. He eventually left his law firm and started a smaller practice, but his reputation in the legal community remained damaged. I learned through Sarah that he still blames me for his professional downfall, unable to accept that his own actions created the consequences he faced. My aunt has tried to rebuild relationships with Emma and Tyler, but the damage to their trust runs deep. They've seen how she treated me and now question other family dynamics they'd previously accepted. Emma told me recently that she's learned to recognize manipulation tactics and refuses to participate in family events that feel performative rather than genuine. The extended family has largely taken sides, with most supporting my aunt and uncle's version of events. But a few relatives have reached out privately to express their support for my decision. My great-aunt, my father's sister, told me she'd always wondered why I seemed so subdued at family gatherings and was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. I've started therapy to work through the complex emotions surrounding my childhood and family relationships. My therapist has helped me understand that my aunt and uncle's treatment of me was a form of emotional abuse, subtle but persistent, designed to keep me grateful and compliant rather than confident and independent. The most healing realization has been that I don't need their validation or acceptance to have value. For years, I'd internalized their message that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of belonging they offered. Now I understand that I deserve full acceptance and respect, not conditional tolerance based on my usefulness and compliance. I've also started dating someone I met through work, a woman who knows my full story and admires how I handled the situation. She comes from a loving, functional family and has helped me understand what healthy family dynamics actually look like. Her parents treat me with warmth and inclusion from day one, never making me feel like an outsider or charity case. Looking back, that moment at the country club was a turning point I didn't know I needed. Walking away from that kids' table wasn't just about rejecting a seating arrangement. It was about rejecting a lifetime of diminished expectations and conditional acceptance. The family I was born into is gone, and the family that raised me never truly accepted me. But I've learned that family isn't just about blood or legal guardianship. It's about mutual respect, genuine care, and unconditional acceptance. I'm building that kind of family now, one relationship at a time, with people who see my worth without needing me to prove it constantly. My phone doesn't ring with desperate calls anymore. My weekends aren't filled with obligatory family gatherings where I'm tolerated rather than celebrated. Instead, I have quiet dinners with Emma and Tyler, game nights with Sarah and her husband, and peaceful evenings in my own space without the weight of others' expectations. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is simply walking away from people who can't see your value. That country club dinner taught me that I'd rather eat alone with dignity than sit at any table where I'm not truly welcome. The revenge wasn't planned or calculated. It was simply the natural consequence of people finally facing the reality of their own actions. And sometimes, that's the most powerful response of all.